Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be speaking in a microphone this evening. You won't hear any audio coming out of it. This is purely for our guests that are joining us online. Yep, again. So hello to everyone that's joining us online. Hello to everyone in the room. It's an absolute delight to welcome you to the CyberQuarter this evening to talk a little bit about Techscaler and what it means for Dundee. Our agenda is as follows. We'll kick off now with our What is Techscaler with Stephen Coleman. Following that, we'll jump into a Q&A with our panel. And at 7:30, we will finish the online session and move into some more networking until 8 o'clock. The colleagues joining me here tonight on the panel, my name is Gardner. I'm the head of national community. Online, we have Anaïs, who is our head of online community. We're joined by Kostis, who's making all magic happen and is running our online session. In the room, we have Stephen Coleman. We have Lara, who is our head of Dundee, Barry, our VP of community, and Jim, who's our VP of education. And scattered throughout the room are a number of other lovely CodeBase colleagues. So I'm sure you'll have a few chats with them. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Stephen.
Yes, so first off, I've been told that I can be quite soft-spoken. So if I mumble and you can't figure out what I'm saying, just give a big wave. Similar to the people online, let Anaïs know, and that will filter through to me somehow. But yeah, really happy to be here. Thank you all for coming along. And yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about what Techscaler is. So what I want to do is talk through here just what Techscaler is doing nationally, and then we'll move on to a Q&A about more focused on Techscaler regionally, and super happy to answer any questions and get into all sorts of detail there. So what is Techscaler? So Techscaler is essentially Scottish Government's platform for supporting tech startups. It was born from the Scottish Tech Ecosystem Review, which was released late 2020, and had a number of recommendations, one of which was the creation of a Techscaler network. So I'll tell you a little bit about what our vision was, what we've put in place now, and Techscaler has now launched. So we'll tell you what's accessible, what you can get into. So Techscaler really has 4 core elements: education, mentorship, community, and place. But critically, a huge part of our model is that Techscaler in year 5 is going to look very different to Techscaler in year 1. It has to iterate, it has to adapt to an ecosystem, to all of the ecosystems, and we recognize that every ecosystem is different. So understanding the shape and the kind of network of partners that we can work with, all of that is really going to shape what Techscaler becomes over the years. So with that said, here's what Techscaler is right now. So Techscaler is for anyone in Scotland that wants to build a startup, or that already has a startup that they want to scale, that they want some support to get to that next stage. So I'll tell you a secret. I am not the biggest fan of the name Techscaler. I think that tech these days is probably isn't really needed, because tech is more and more part of everything. And it's also a little bit exclusionary. It implies that it's for people with technical ability, technical knowledge. It's really not. And scaler implies that we're just supporting with the scaling side of things. And really, as I'll show you, the Techscaler support is from pre-startup all the way up to scale up. But yeah, so Techscaler, it's for people that want to build a startup. They want to understand what that looks like in Scotland, what support's out there, what the Techscaler support is, also what other ecosystem organizations are able to provide to help with that. And it's for those who have already built a startup and want to know how to get onto the next phase. And as I said, it's not just for techies. It's really about focusing on helping people to build their business not helping to build their technology. There are a lot of other great support organizations that help, specifically with the technical side of things. We'll work with them, but really this is about the kind of business models, investment, your approach, culture, really just like how do you build that business. So what do we mean by a tech startup? I think the more and more of these discussions I've had, the more people kind of have different ideas of what a tech startup even is. For me, we're really focused on innovation-driven startups. So startups that have an innovation at the core of what they are trying to do. And that's not just innovation as a general concept, but specifically an innovative core to their business. Really, in practice, that essentially means software product businesses for our purposes. That's our kind of core focus. But the lines are blurred on that, and there's kind of other business types that fall into that. But broadly, software product. That can come from any vertical, agri-tourism, financial, health. Every vertical has some element of where tech can have a part to play. And we want to support that. And yeah, in the kind of broader spectrum of tech, different business types that encompasses, know that there are partners that are much better placed to support, and we can signpost to and work alongside to develop anything if there are any gaps. To get into Techscaler, there's eligibility criteria at different stages. And really that's not about being exclusive. It's about just trying to make sure that we've identified what support is right for you at any given stage. And whether Techscaler is even right for you. It may be that there's some other organization that we think would be a better fit for you to work with. But yeah, in terms of Techscaler, it's really just making sure that you're not going in too early, too late, that we're actually doing something that's going to help you right now. And at the earliest stage, the eligibility criteria are super minimal. It's essentially just sign a code of conduct. At that point, please, you can come into the community, you can go through our first programs, you can be part of the network. And then as the startup matures, the criteria kind of become more and more reflecting the maturity level. So I mentioned that it was education, community, place, mentorship. So this is our education pathway. It's from pre-startup to scale up. There are 4 programs along that pathway. So at the pre-startup phase, it's startup basics. At the next stage is startup first steps. Following that, we have startup next steps. And following that, we have Reforge. In between each of those programs, there's a kind of leaving you alone almost, where you kind of need to go and apply lessons and try to build your business to the next stage. But leaving alone isn't quite right, because that's where the community comes into the support. That's where mentorship comes in to support at different issues along the time. But yeah, in terms of our cohort-based programs, that's where we're at. And at the end there, you see there's a gap between startup next steps and Reforge. That's a very deliberate gap, because at that phase, that's where most of our partners can come in and provide some additional support as well, because there you're turning into a scale up, and there are so many more factors that you need to build into your business. There's a ton of support out there at that stage that we can link into. So the Startup Basics course, that's an online self-paced course, really pre-startup, just trying to essentially wave a flag for people to try and build new stuff. So it's talking about how startups are created, what a startup even is, what community is available, what support's available, what the first things you need to think of are, how you even come up with an idea in the first place. So super early stage stuff. The First Steps program, that's our first cohort-based program. It's 10-week, 1 afternoon a week. And that's looking at that kind of startup 101 piece of, how do you raise your first funding? How do you, identify a market? What's your focus? How do you, think about a minimum viable product? Culture, values at that early stage. So yeah, really that 101 piece. For next steps, that's another 10-week program, same model, but really looking at startups that have already built their early product. Maybe they've got the first couple of customers, they've raised some funding, and they want to grow. They want to get to that next phase. So, what does it mean to raise your next round of funding? How do you build a team? What does culture look like at that point? And various other aspects of growing your company. Really, it's geared towards trying to find product market fit. And at that point, that's where we get onto Reforge. So the scale-up stage of that pathway, we've partnered with Reforge. They're a Silicon Valley-based scale-up education platform. There's around 20 programs. And at that scale-up phase, unlike the previous programs, the scale-up phase is more focused on their team. The previous programs are much more focused on entrepreneurs themselves and how they build and grow the business. At the scale-up phase, your team has grown, and roles have become more structured. It starts to make sense to have programs around product management, marketing, these kind of defined roles within a team. So that's where Reforge comes in, and they have their own community. This links into that international community, which is really strong. And that pathway, it's important to say, it's not something you need to go into from the start and work your way through. We get that there are multiple entrance points, there are multiple exit points. We already have people going through Reforge, for example, and people that are interested in the various stages. So again, that's part of that eligibility, is to understand where are you in your journey and which piece of this is most appropriate. We'll provide the best support. And you see along the top of this diagram the loops backwards. Those we're calling resilience loops, but really it's kind of a viral feedback moment where we want to capture people that are giving back. So that captures people becoming mentors and giving back to people that are maybe a few steps behind them, so helping on that journey. It's also employees coming out of startups that are growing who want to actually go and build their own startups, so they go back and do programs earlier. It's capturing people who have already got to a certain stage and the thing has failed, so they want to go again, learn what the current lessons are. Importantly, all of these programs are operator driven, operator delivered. So this isn't CodeBase teaching all of this ourselves. What we do here is we provide a framework and we bring in current operators to deliver relevant content based on what that particular module is. So for example, if there's a module on fundraising, we'll bring in a founder who's recently raised some funding in Scotland, and they can talk to you about what the best practice is globally, but also what a Scottish reality is, and help you to kind of navigate those two worlds. So that's our education pathway. The next column is mentorship, and that's really one-to-one, again, with current operators or very recent operators. And we do matchmaking with you to figure out what stage you're at, what challenges you're facing, and we want to connect you with a mentor who will be relevant, who can really help you kind of understand what your next few steps need to be. And those mentors also can connect into their wider networks. So again, through all of this, we're really trying to create network effects. And then we're on to place. So I think it's fair to say that when the Scottish Tech Ecosystem Review recommended the creation of a Techscaler network, it was very focused on hubs as the core element. And we're in a beautiful hub here that we're partnered with, the CyberQuarter. CodeBase started as CodeBase Edinburgh, the hub. So I firmly believe in the benefits of co-locating with peers. But our vision for Techscaler was not focused on the hubs. Really, it was focused on that education and community and the mentorship. The hubs for us are a supporting element, but place really is all of Scotland. Techscaler needs to be for anyone in Scotland. So the hubs provide a center of gravity in a region. They're super important for us, but we will also have regional pop-up activity with partners, and we'll have online place to support people that are not able to or don't want to come into hubs. And super importantly, you do not need to be a tenant in a hub in order to access any of the education, any of the community, any of the mentorship. All of that is free. It's paid for by ScotGov. It's freely available. And yeah, the only aspect where there's where you need to pay for something is if you're coming into a hub, and then you need to pay for rent of a desk or room or whatever. But everything everything else is available for free. So with that said, the hubs. So there are core hubs for opening: Edinburgh, Stirling, Aberdeen, which are our existing hubs. We've added into that mix Dundee and CyberQuarter here. Inverness, which is a partnership with WASPs and the Creative Academy. And Glasgow, the initial space in Glasgow is a partnership with Barclays and their Eagle Lab. And Dumfries, our model was essentially to say, we think that Dumfries, we need to build community, build education first, and then build a hub later. So we are hopeful that Dumfries will be building a hub in a year or so, but that will be developed. But yeah, each of those hubs is with a different partner, and really across the board there, we've started with a single hub in each region, but with our model which is hub agnostic, we really want to partner with other providers of space, other support organizations to be able to bring this education to the people that want it. So to have events, have presence in multiple hubs across any given region. And really that gets into the community. And so connecting those hubs, connecting the pop-up activity, connecting the online communities that we're building, really trying to create network effects. So really also trying to have an outward-looking community. So not just, Techscaler is a Scottish Government initiative. It's to support Scottish businesses, but a really important part of what we wanted to do is to say, look, this needs to be outward-looking. We need to connect with other countries, other ecosystems, learn from them, share knowledge, and try to help startups to build those international connections as well. So those are super important. And yeah, that's the online platform there. So if any of you are interested, you can go and join that right now. You just need to agree to the code of conduct. Hopefully it's straightforward. Just be a nice person, basically, or don't be a non-nice person at the very minimum. Also on that same platform, that's where you'll find our Startup Basics course. Again, just freely available. Go through it at your own pace if you're interested. And yeah, importantly, the Techscaler is not just a code-based thing. Techscaler is a collection of partnerships. So at the moment we have 33 partners. I'd say that with a slight italics because we're kind of growing, but yeah, 33 partners for now. We want to build more partnerships. You'll see on this slide, a bunch of universities, a bunch of councils. Where we don't already have a partnership with a university or a college or a council, we're intending to build them. We're partnered with all the enterprise agencies. This is really about creating something that is joined up. It's not about coming in and kind of stamping our way of doing things. This is about understanding that a lot of great activity has already happened. The ecosystems have already been working for years. There are different building blocks, and we want to kind of come in and say, hey, look, there's an additive element that Techscaler can bring. We want to be an additive platform, but to do that, we need to work with partners to understand an ecosystem, understand what's already going on, how we can fit in, and how we can help. So yeah, to conclude, we're not the startup police. We're not trying to own tech. This really is just about being an enabler. It's a government initiative. This isn't CodeBase coming in and trying to do our own thing. We're just a custodian of this contract. We want to help startups. We want to help others who want to help startups. At very minimum, we can signpost and connect a lot of dots, but there's a lot more that we can build, and this is going to look very different in a few years' time. So yeah, we're super excited, and yeah, we'll have a chat just now if you want to learn a bit more, and then beyond that, go and check out the website. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We are going to move into our Q&A section now. So if I could please ask the panel to come up. So I'm going to be taking questions from the audience, but this is going to be with this microphone, which has a really long cable. If you are right at the back, it might be easier if you stood or perhaps stepped into the corridor if you have a question to ask. But I'd like to kick things off. Does anyone have a question? Just raise your hand and I'll come on over to you.
So if there's an idea within a studio that's not necessarily related to the work they do, but they want to branch into that market, would you say Techscaler can help with that and help them understand how to do it?
Just for clarity, if I could ask what kind of studio you're talking about there? Video games. Okay. And then maybe move into like animation. Okay, so this is a question that we kind of anticipated in Dundee for obvious reasons. I hope there's a lot of other people in the room. I think with gaming is an interesting one for us because speaking from an education perspective, so I'm VP of Education, a lot of the focus of what we do in education is kind of focused on playbooks that I guess come from the SaaS world, so software as a service model. So all the business models around that and the playbooks that come from that world are targeted generally at kind of, I guess, B2B SaaS, but then there's a kind of landscape around that to which there's varying degrees of relevance to that model. So when it comes to gaming, just as a caveat, we in the past we've seen where some of that stuff is highly relevant, and then there's other stuff that is less relevant. So we've taught in the past a program called Creative Bridge, where we've had people from the gaming sector come along to that, and they found that extremely valuable in terms of understanding how that stuff can translate over and so on. When it comes to the studio versus product model, which is what I'm thinking you're asking here, is that kind of going from serving others or like having a lot of different products on the go at once to moving more into a dedicated space. Is that the question? That's something we've done a lot of mentorship and education around in the past, more generally. So not just within gaming, but more widely. So one of the patterns that we see a lot in the UK in particular is consultancy firms or agencies or people who have a particular kind of sectoral focus, but work on a kind of service basis with clients and doing bespoke work. But through that work are identify opportunities to create a product that's more generally available to other people, so not just doing bespoke work for a single client at a time. That's a process we've seen a lot of people struggle with, and we kind of see patterns around that stuff. And it's underserved, I think, in education and training online, because I think particularly with the kind of Silicon Valley model, the expectation is that you're doing a 0 to 1 thing where you're kind of starting from scratch and there's nothing there yet, and you don't have an existing business. You're kind of going into a completely new thing from scratch. So we're taking all that stuff on board in the education and training opportunities that we're creating. But I think the other thing worth noting is that where there's kind of different challenges that come up because of your particular background. So if you've got an existing company, you're wanting to move more into product development, for example, we have mentors who have done that in various different sectors and can help in that transition and understand the challenges involved in doing that. I've seen it myself personally, but we have, I think we're up to about 35 or 40 mentors now. So within that pool of mentors, we have a fair number of people who have experienced that. So there's a combination opportunity of the programs themselves, which teach playbooks that we try and apply to various different sectors and business models. But then the mentorship is the opportunity to really dig into your own kind of particular circumstances and challenges that relate to where you're coming from and what expertise you're bringing and the opportunities within that. So that's a long waffly answer, but I hope that kind of covers your concerns around that.
Yeah.
Hello, and it still doesn't work. That's fine. Yeah, my question is based around, there's already quite a few scalers and cohort systems that already exist. Based on research that you guys have done, are you looking at sort of expanding who gets access, or is it more circumstantial? You've done this research and you know where to improve your system over other people's? No one wants the mic.
So Techscaler is really about creating a joined up approach, about creating something that's consistent across Scotland in terms of just the overall direction of travel and the overall approach that we're trying to do. But a lot of the organizations that you're, I think, talking about are people that we're talking to that we want to work with to support. So it's not really about coming in and saying, hey, that was rubbish, make it again. It's about like coming in and saying, hey, like, here's some stuff that's working really well. Awesome, we'll signpost to that. Here's some stuff where we can see that there's maybe a gap, but we can come in and maybe do help to fill that gap, but we're not trying to take over the whole thing. Or if at an ecosystem level there's a massive gap, then sure, we'll come in and do what we can. But again, like, we're quite conscious of scope creep. We want to make sure that we're not just kind of trying to be everything to everyone. We have a focus. This is a new initiative that's being built from scratch. It's a new model for doing this. It doesn't, this precise model doesn't exist anywhere. So I think that's really exciting. But it's also, a massive challenge, because we need to figure out what's actually going to work. So we need to, operate like a startup ourselves, do lots of tight iteration cycles and, figure out what works, what doesn't. Don't do the stuff that doesn't work, do more of the stuff that does. So yeah, probably a roundabout answer, but basically we want to work with rather than replace.
Awesome, great, thank you.
Just to add to that, on your question about research specifically, I think there's a long-term goal for us as well to do some research in this space to help us guide what we do. I think in our previous incarnation prior to Techscaler, it's an ambition that we had, but we just didn't have the resources available to do that. Within Techscaler, we have some resources to kind of start doing more research on a Scotland-wide basis around who's out there, what they're working on, what the challenges, all of that stuff. And both in the course of operating Techscaler, but actually going out and discovering this stuff for ourselves as well. And that's a current hot topic within the organization, isn't it? So
awesome, thank you.
Watch this space on that.
Hi guys. I think people could just hear me online here, but not amplifying my voice. So great to have you guys in Dundee, Techscaler in Dundee. I think it's opportune timing. I think we need more meetups again in the city, and I think that's kind of fallen a little bit by the wayside, and I think just to connect the community a lot better, which I think is what you guys want to do. So hopefully that's the start of some really good things. You've talked about Silicon Valley, and a lot to learn from that, but it's obviously a completely different ecosystem there, right, compared to Scotland and certainly Dundee. So have you looked at other ecosystems globally in Scandinavia or other places with more parallels to the challenges we face in Scotland, but also the opportunities and things that Scotland as a nation brings to the table? And how could we apply them, and what do you think the low hanging fruit is for Scotland as a nation? And if I was pushing you, Dundee.
I can get that off, but I don't have any much. I think the person who's best placed to answer that unfortunately isn't here this evening, but who's been doing a lot of work on that front. But so to Stephen's point in his talk, we have been actively really since CodeBase began. I think we've been actively outwardly looking at other ecosystems and not just Silicon Valley. I think the reason we reference Silicon Valley is because that's where a lot of the educational kind of content emerges from. But in terms of learning from other ecosystems and what they've done, we tend to do that on a more kind of personal basis by going to visit them and setting up relationships with them and so on. So just a couple of months ago, we were in Germany. Well, a couple of us were in Germany, not anyone here, but we went out to Dresden to meet the ecosystem there, which is really interesting because it seems to be more focused on kind of combining software with manufacturing, and there's a lot kind of in Germany in particular, but Dresden in particular, there's a kind of a good manufacturing hub there. So that particular flavor is kind of centered around that, and a lot of the innovation there is focused on stuff that comes out of that. Likewise, we have been to Helsinki in the last year. Where else have we been over the years? And yeah, I'm struggling to talk about the learnings because I think
yeah, no, so absolutely, that's a huge part of that being outward looking, is just like understanding, we need to learn ourselves, but also, we can share the knowledge that we have built up, because, Scotland isn't behind everyone. There's some stuff that we're actually doing quite well. And so realizing those opportunities and figuring out, okay, well, how can we share knowledge, and how can we build those connections to actually, try and grow the pie for everyone, not just kind of not just have like a kind of thinner and thinner slices of the same pie. So yeah, like really that kind of being outward looking thing, to be honest, like that's one of the big benefits of the hubs themselves, is that they're always on. And so historically, CodeBase, we've always had, whenever there's an ambassador or a trade mission or someone that's interested in innovation in tech, they'll come and visit, and then we can build relationships. They can connect us in with their ecosystem, and we're able to learn and teach and share, and that's super valuable. I mean, I struggle to pick out like individual like lessons, to be honest, but like just to be honest, as a cultural piece, I think being more outward looking is only a good thing. Building those connections, particularly at the moment, is super valuable. And yeah, we absolutely want to do more of it.
Can I add on the low-hanging fruit part? So you asked Brian about what the low-hanging fruit is for Dundee specifically. So I'm, as head of Dundee's regional engagement, I've been spending a lot of time looking at what's happening in the area, and it's a really interesting environment that we have here. We've got so many amazing pockets of innovation. We've got the game sector, we've got life sciences, we've got biomedical research happening. We have so many little communities, creative communities, even sustainability. And there's such an opportunity here for us to try and almost provide a little bit of glue between these different ecosystems, try and cross-pollinate a little bit more. I know that happens, but it's trying to kind of join the dots between these different industries. And this isn't just in Dundee. I know from my other counterparts in other regions, there's so many really exciting little pockets of innovation in each of the different regions. Every region has its own identity. And that's the same anywhere you go in the world. Each of these ecosystems has its specific identity and flavor. And I think we can really harness that here, showcase that to the rest of the network, create this amazing opportunity to kind of highlight all of the amazing innovation that's happening in all of our regions. And I'm hoping that this is going to be a great way to start that. So, yeah.
We need to join it up better. More needs to be done for that. And just to close off, why I mentioned Scandinavia, it was a few years back. There's a guy, you keep looking him up, he's not at Spotify anymore, his name's Stanley Wood, and he was head of design for Spotify, and we actually managed to get him to Dundee for a conference we were running at the time around design. And how it happened was random. It was like we'd contacted a couple of my colleagues who'd met Spotify in London, and they said, well, it would be great to have Spotify speak at our conference. And this is circled around the senior management in Spotify. And the guy Stanley, originally his family's from Arbroath, and he said, I'll go because I'm due a trip home. And he brought up an Iron Brew and things like this, right? So he came across, and I just asked him, what do you think Sweden do? He'd lived his whole life in Sweden. Like, what do you think Sweden do differently? Like, all these different clusters and hubs are so successful. And he said, you can, like, even the fashion of people in Sweden, they're quite colourful. He said that we're very good at picking the best things from around the world and combining them back in Sweden, if that makes sense. So I think like this outwardly looking approach is really good, because I think we could cherry pick specific things around the world, but then adapt them for what we do well in Scotland.
Yeah, exactly. And that adaptation piece is crucial, because what works in Silicon Valley or in Finland or wherever probably won't work if you just try to map it directly across here. It's about understanding, well, we know it doesn't. Yeah, absolutely. That's been tried and it doesn't work. But what we think can work is, learning from that, as you say, cherry picking, but then bringing it back and kind of translating it into into reality here. Like, how does that play in our existing ecosystem in the reality of Scotland?
Cheers. So I think this kind of harks back to one of the points made by Astro Dreamer, when this whole not going from 0 to 1 and having something to start from and going to something new. From your experience of CodeBase before Techscaler, being across a number of different areas around the country, what are the things that you were doing in those places that this has given you an amazing opportunity to bring those kind of things into new areas, obviously without wanting to step on people's toes or tell people you've been doing it wrong for all these years, we're going to do it this way. But what are those things that you're most excited that you feel like you were doing things in a good way in these places, and you want to help Dundee bring those things here?
Yeah. So Barry, I'll hand over to you shortly. First off, to say there's a lot of stuff that we did very, very wrong. We made tons of mistakes. So much naivety, taking risks we didn't even realize we were taking at the time. Made tons of mistakes, but managed to kind of learn from those and grow. I think from the very start, one of the good things that we did was essentially to position ourselves as an enabler. So not try to run everything ourselves, but really to try and just work with the community, work with founders, work with their teams, work with people who are interested in being part of that ecosystem, and just help to provide them with support to do what they want to do. So whether it's someone that comes along and is really keen to put together a meetup, we'll say, awesome, you should run that meetup and we'll help you to do that with this support. But this is you doing it. This is the it's grassroots approach. And then the kind of peer support between founders. So before we had any funding to put education programs together ourselves, it was about just whenever a founder would come to us and say, oh, I'm having this particular problem, we go, all right, we think we've heard that before, and we know that these 3 people dealt with that problem fairly recently, so we'll connect you. And so having that community and understanding those links and understanding that culture was something that from the early days we I think we did quite well, and that we've really taken that into Techscaler. Again, I mentioned earlier about us positioning Techscaler as an enabling layer, not trying to own it, but just trying to provide support to essentially enable the community to grow itself. Sorry, Barry, I'm aware I've probably said everything. Anything you want to?
No, just to kind of reiterate what you said, Stephen. I think the big thing that we learned was the value of community, the value of that peer support network that people absolutely need and rely on. We've said this at various other events in the past, but there are lots of real world examples where founders will ask a founder for help and can save them months on runway, or I've given them really valuable advice. So it's just about creating the conditions where founders and the ecosystem can come together, whether that's through events like this or whether that's through our online community. I think that's what we've discovered where the real value is.
We have a question online, so I'll just come on over to Kostis.
Hi, we have a couple of questions online. The first one is like, do you support people who are looking for jobs in the tech sector? And then we have also a follow-up questions like, what does success look like for Techscaler?
I can very quickly answer the question about people who are looking for jobs. If you are part of our online community, there is a jobs board on there. So if you're hiring, then you can advertise. If you're looking for a role, you can advertise. But it's also the perfect place if you are looking for a new role or a new opportunity to network with your peers across all the different regions, all the different verticals. So that's that's an easy win, I would say. And I'll.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, completely agree with that. And yeah, for the question of what success looks like. So success is going to look different at different stages for Techscaler, but right now, for me, success would look like more people starting businesses. I think that, although, we've talked about the pathway and the fact that, there are companies that are currently scaling that we're supporting through Reforge at the moment. Really, the biggest job to be done for us is to really get more people to start, and then as that happens, then we can start to work on later stages of support. But really, like I think Techscaler came about because Scottish government realised they just need more startups, and then by working with CodeBase, they've I hope you'll agree, they've kind of entrusted that to the ecosystem to do itself through a kind of more structured program. I guess to Brian's point earlier around the outward-looking piece, every nation well, maybe not every nation, but many nations in the world are going through a similar kind of journey, a similar kind of realization that they need to create more startups. So Scottish government is no different in that, but I think that this model, and I'm very biased, so take it with a pinch of salt, but I think that this model is genuinely unique within that context. I think we've met with many other governments, local and national, from other countries, who are doing it through different models. Like they're doing it very much through corporate partners or through investment vehicles. Time's going to tell what works. No doubt what will work will be kind of some weird combination of things. So again, cherry picking is important. But from our point of view, like our model was to say this needs to be grassroots, it needs to be the startup community building itself, supporting itself, and yeah, I'm really enthusiastic about the possibilities of where that can go.
Hi there, just one last thing. So when we're looking at the sort of model you guys are presenting, I think it's really, really solid. There's one bit I'm missing from my specific sort of circumstance is looking at sort of venture capitalists or angel investor, because there's a certain point where most people get to in a business where they're like, my idea is, can I say shithole? Their idea is shithole. Okay, it's after 9 maybe. I don't know. I had one cider, right? So their idea is shithole, and the whole premise is, let's say they're a miner. They have the mine. They found the gold, right? They have one pickaxe, and they go to the investor, and they're like, I really need another pickaxe or a drill or another guy that can come help me because this thing is the thing that's going to make money. So I need a bit of capital. Is that something that you're looking towards in the future, implementing into the model that either leads towards investment or funding, either using government or grants or however it works? But is that something that you guys are thinking?
So the short answer is yes. It's not something that we are doing at the moment, but yeah, I think it's publicly known, or it was at least publicly stated, so I'm allowed to talk about it, that ScotGov are interested in looking at their own funding models in the context of, Techscaler now exists, what does their funding look like? Should they map something to Techscaler? That's a massive question. And organizationally, structurally, if it's going to happen, will be difficult. Just because it's a very complex thing, and obviously we're in an environment where big question marks around what funding is even available. But there's certainly a lot of will, not just within our team, but from Scottish Government in general, to look at that and hopefully come up with some answers. In advance of that, our approach is really just to have investors as part of the network and part of the community activity. So having investors in for kind of officer sessions or bigger group workshops to understand some of the challenges and some of the things that startups need to bear in mind from an angel or a VC point of view. But we're not directly connecting with funding at the moment.
Just to add to that, from an education perspective, one of the stated goals that we have from our education programs is to improve the investor readiness of the startups that engage in those programs, with the aim that towards the end of those programs, like a lot of programs that you might have come across before, we're looking to where we can best involve investors in those programs for visibility. Their goal is deal flow, frankly, and always is. So that like, who can find the coolest startup that no one else has found. So, they're always on the lookout. They spend a lot of their time engaging in ecosystems and going to events and engaging in education programs and so on. So we're looking at how we can best do that. We're still in the process of developing our first programs. So it'll be an experiment to start with. And then the other important thing to say is that Techscaler will not take any equity in any of the startups. I think maybe it's an obvious thing to some people, but for anyone who's been through accelerators and incubators elsewhere, that's the commercial ones. That's not always, there is equity stake involved. Often that's not the case for any of the Techscaler programs.
There's another one online I'll grab quickly.
So yeah, there are a few online questions. So what are the next steps for the Dundee area? And could you possibly mention some things that you are focusing on right now for the region?
So in this area, the first thing we need to do is really start building that community here. So there's already existing communities in Dundee. There's very active members of the tech scene. And what we want to do is try and complement the activity that's already happening here. So we'll be running series of what we call flagpole events from our hub here in Dundee. Those will be running on a regular basis. We're also looking to partner with other local organisations to see what support we can provide in addition to the support that's already here. Basically looking at all of the activity that's going on in the area and seeing what we can focus on in terms of those initial events that happen in this hub and also other hubs. Aside from that, we already have our online community up and running, so anyone in the Dundee area can join the online community, and we'll be sharing any of the events that are happening in the area on the community and also on, I guess, online. So there's it's still very much work in process. We only just started this hub, and we will be trying to listen to everyone in the Dundee area and decide what areas are going to be the best to focus on. Yeah.
Cheers. All right, okay, so deal. Just to kind of add to what Lara said about kind of events and meetups that we want to do in this region. I sometimes think we've got you here under false pretenses, so we can tell you all about Techscaler, but really I'm here to listen and listen to the community. So if you think there's a meetup that isn't taking place that should take place, then come and tell us. We'll help you. We'll help facilitate it. We really want a lot of these meetups and events to be community-led and community-empowered. We can help facilitate it, no matter how niche it is. If it's vertical specific, if there's only 4 of you in the city and you want to get together and have a coffee, I'll buy the coffee for you. I'll pay for it. So come and talk to us about events and meetups and things that you would like to see.
Yeah, so I guess the other immediate thing that you can do is to look at the website and check out the Startup First Steps landing page that has gone live this week, which is our first cohort-based program that Stephen was talking about. So that's for people who are in the earlier stages of their startup journey, but committed enough to be able to dedicate 10 weeks of 3-hour workshops and going off and applying those learnings to your own idea or your business. That's something you can look at now, and we'll be we're already able to take applications for that, which include going through that Techscaler membership application as well. So check it out.
Do you imagine that the hubs might naturally specialize if they're being very community driven, and would you therefore then support that with specialists in that area, like Dundee, obviously cybersecurity or games, for example?
Yeah, so Techscaler is sector agnostic. It's generalist in that sense, but absolutely we see there being aggregations in particular verticals in different regions. So as you said, Dundee, absolutely, we imagine we'll naturally see more games focused or cyber focused, for example. In Aberdeen, we're seeing more energy focused. That's going to happen, and it'd be crazy for us not to lean into that and support that, because you can start to create more relevant communities that have better expertise at helping each other. As Jim said in response to one of the other questions earlier, in terms of the Techscaler support. And the education and mentorship, education program in particular, aspects of that will absolutely be relevant to the games industry, to cyber, but some just won't. There will be absolutely some unique things that we need to work out, and that's something that we are keen to either signpost to if it's been done really well elsewhere, or work with partners to develop if there's a gap there that needs additional support. But that wouldn't be something that Techscaler would do. Techscaler has that general focus, but CodeBase is not just Techscaler, and that's something that CodeBase we want to help support that additional activity. So this event's on Techscaler, so I won't divert too much. But CodeBase, we deliver a number of vertical specific programs. So we've done law tech, health tech, energy tech. We just won, we're part of a winning consortium for a UK government initiative, part of which will be CodeBase delivering another 4 vertical programs. There's more stuff beyond that I can't talk about yet, but we'll talk about in the next week or so. So there's a bunch of scope there, and we firmly believe that in that vertical piece, and our specialism is not games, it's not cyber. So in that regard, we'll need to work with people who understand those sectors, so again, just being additive, understanding the building blocks, understanding what part we can play and what part we shouldn't play.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. This is a different kind of question, but you do have a good understanding of what kind of sectors are in perhaps each city just within Scotland, and that's the whole point of this event. But do you think, in the vein of like a Silicon Valley, do you think there's room for a sort of title or an appearance to come out of Scotland for people to be like, yeah, I'm going to go work there for a while, in the same sense that people are like, I'm going to Silicon Valley? Do you think an identity is either now, like, is there any terms that you've thought of and coined in your heads maybe that you know of?
Yeah,
maybe not as relevant.
Yeah. The jute industry.
We're a little nervous at the moment about putting a brand name on it. I think there are still some memories of Silicon Glen, which was not the best success. So that's not something we're doing just now. we're really focusing on just trying to build some momentum and kind of widen that funnel, create more, help more startups to start and then to grow. But pragmatically, marketing exists. Marketing is a super important part of building a startup, but it's also, there's a national marketing aspect as well. So, these questions will come up. If we're doing a good job, they'll come up faster. And, we'll no doubt have thoughts on that. But at the moment, no.
This is, yeah, to Stephen's point, this is kind of an emergent property as the way we see it. I think there's other players involved in this as well. So you have, so talking for the moment about Edinburgh, there are a number of companies in Edinburgh who are bigger companies who have multiple locations nationally or globally, who see Edinburgh as a great place to come because of engineering talent, for example, and that's a lot down to the university. And there's a reason why, the startup culture that's in Edinburgh has had some part to play in that, because the successful startups that have been created in Edinburgh create some of that talent that's able to then bring that commercial experience into those existing companies who can set up a site in that location. So, and that then brings in further talent. So there's this kind of snowball effect, or, what's the phrase? No, it's gone. But the key to starting that and getting that going is it takes a lot more than just an initiative like Techscaler, because there's so much other stuff that plays into it, like local policy and housing and all sorts of things that we don't have the remit for. So, how you create a location that people want to come to is a big question that we're interested in creating the parts of the emergent behavior that we can impact, but that comes as a kind of secondary thing to what Stephen was talking about in terms of creating the conditions for those startups to exist and thrive. So.
That is all we have time for this evening. So I'm going to bring this session to a close. I'd like to say thank you very much to the panel for speaking this evening. Thank you very much to Cheryl from the CyberQuarter for hosting us in this beautiful space. And thank you very much to everyone online joining us from home. And thank you all to you for taking the time out of your evening to come and join us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to chatting to a few of you afterwards. Thank you for your time and your questions. And if you have any further questions, you can head on over to our website, www.techscaler.co.uk, and you can apply to join our online community or to be a member, and we'll be in touch with you soon. So thank you very much for joining us this evening, and hope to see you soon.